Good evening. EBRD is the lending arm of the EU, originally established to help transform former Soviet economies into more independent ones. The bank has recently reactivated its presence in Armenia, and Mr. George Akhalkatsi, the head of the EBRD office in Yerevan, has kindly hosted the first analytical in their office. Mr. Akhalkatsi, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ashley, very much for your interest to interview me. It's a pleasure. This is the second time that I remember during my presence in Armenia that we welcome you in our office, and I would welcome further interventions and further interviews from your side.
Glad to hear that. EBRD held its 2024 annual meeting and business forum in Yerevan, scaling up support for Armenia. Is there a political component in the decisions that the bank makes, meaning do democratic reforms and democratic transition make a difference in EBRD's decisions in the flow of millions?
Thank you for your question. Before I start answering your question, I wanted to also emphasize that EU is one of the shareholders of EBRD, indeed, so is European Investment Bank. But on top of that, we have 73 other shareholders that are not part of EU and come from across the globe. As you know, it's a multilateral development bank that was established in early 90s to help the countries that were impacted by Soviet Union to transition to market economies, and our mission is to improve the lives of people in the countries where we operate. Democratic transition is a big topic on our agenda, and it is the key aspect of our agreement establishing the bank. And of course, Armenia has done a significant progress, and we've seen that in a number of rankings, including Transparency International's ranking and improving corruption, where Armenia outperformed every other country in past years. So all this progress, including in the democracy, in curbing inflation, curbing corruption, supporting business, has to be appreciated. And one way to support this process is indeed to hold the annual meeting in the country. This decision was taken back in 2019, and since then, unfortunately, COVID has interrupted our plans, but we stood to our promise, and we held our 33rd annual meeting and business forum in Armenia just a couple of weeks ago. It was a very important event. It was the first of such events, annual meeting of International Financial Institution in Armenia, that put a lot of spotlight on the country. We had over 2,500 official participants and another close to 800 people involved in organizing the event, including local students as volunteers, local companies. So it was an event that brought together a lot of nationalities, a lot of professionals, and on top of the institutional agendas and the bank had, which is necessary and a main component of the annual meetings, we had a very interesting business forum, which comprised of 10 panel discussions on very important current topics and future-oriented topics. We had country investment outlook sessions where our countries where EBRD operates had a chance to display the investment opportunities in their countries. We had a very important and successful host country investment outlook session where Armenia showcased its progress and the opportunities. And then we had a number of smaller events where individual companies and sectors were able to present their cutting-edge technologies or work. I also want to mention that a big part of our annual meeting was a digital day that was held at Tumo, where we had a very important keynote speaker, Mr. Nubarafeyan, talking about AI and its impact on the future of business, alongside a number of panels discussing digitalization in financial sectors, fintech, cybersecurity, and similar topics.
Mr. Akhalkatsi, from what I gather, the transition to democracy played a role in EBRD's choosing Yerevan as the venue for the forum. How about financing? Did transition to democracy directly lead to more finances?
I cannot quote a direct correlation, but I think that's a natural phenomena that more democratized society and country is more efficient in absorbing international financing, and this also the investment volumes that we have achieved in Armenia speaks for that. For example, in last 5 years, the total investment in Armenia from EBRD side was about 630 million euros, whereas only this year we will be achieving close to 500 million euros. This would not have been possible if our partners, both in public sector and private sector, were not able to absorb this financing. And what we see in Armenia is that the SMEs are growing at a quite fast rate. They are improving their corporate governance. They're becoming ready to obtain EBRD financing and report accordingly according to the IFI standards. At the same time, we have very important infrastructural projects with the public sector, where we are also helping the government to improve their capacity to implement these projects.
Over 200 small projects in Armenia. You invest in green finances, digitalization, and infrastructure. How does this help the economic recovery of the country and diversification of economy, namely lessening Armenia's dependency on Russian ecosystem?
Before the start of the annual meeting, our investments in Armenia were about 2.1 billion euros across 201 projects. During the annual meeting, we signed 12 additional transactions with the aggregate volume north of 300 million euros. Now, these investments were in various sectors. One big part of the investment was in Sisian Gajaran Road, which is our sustainable infrastructure group project, where we help public sector and also private to improve the infrastructure. This includes renewable sector, where we have financed the first ever utility scale solar power plant in Armenia. This is a Maastricht project in Martuni region. And this helps creation of a local electricity capacity, which decreases the reliance on Russian energy. On another hand, the construction of the Sisian Gajaran Road, which is part of the north-south corridor, will facilitate further integration and connection of Armenian economy to the middle corridor, and will allow easier exports from Armenia. On top of the investments, we are also working with Armenian authorities to look into diversifying export routes and exports from the country, export of products, to help them diversify the overall export basket. I think big part of what we do is support to the financial institutions, where we have historically signed a lot of transactions, and this is our cooperation with 9 local commercial banks with whom we finance a number of segments, including women in business, including small and medium enterprises, energy efficiency credit lines, trade finance facilities. All of these contribute to further diversification of exports and decrease of reliance on one single market.
Let us talk in detail about each point that you just mentioned. Armenia has seen a substantial economic growth, but we have a problem of financial absorption. You said democracy contributes to the absorption, but we're not yet where we would like to be. For example, the EU has opened a window of about 2.6 billion euros, but our economic capacity to digest is smaller than that. How does cooperation between EBRD and Armenia help increase the capacity to absorb and thus lead to less dependence on the Eurasian Economic Union and to a wider door to the European Union market?
So 2.6 billion euros that you mentioned is is a combination of number of flagships that EU and Armenia have agreed on. One of those flagships is development of the North-South corridor. And yes, this is a very complex project. It's a very complex terrain, geography. So we, together with our partner IFIs in European Investment Bank and Asian Development Bank, will be supporting the government and road department fund in increasing their capacity to procure at the highest international standards and then implement this project with increased capacity. Yes, it's a challenge in any developing economy to implement complex projects like that, but this is a learning curve, and we have an excellent cooperation with the Ministry of Territorial Administration and Infrastructure and Ministry of Finance to improve this absorption capacity. Another big direction in this 2.6 billion euros is support to the private sector and all the credit lines that we are able to deploy through our partner financial institutions with EU support. And this is these are easier to implement because we are talking about deploying funding to SMEs that have existing businesses and want to increase their capacity, improve their productions, diversify their exports. So these are a large number of smaller transactions, and there is not a significant bottleneck in implementing those.
Back to diversification problem. With the logistic handicaps that we have, Armenian product standardization is a challenge. Do EBRD projects aim at cost reduction and quality enhancement?
Indeed. I mentioned small and medium enterprise competitiveness and inclusion credit lines that we have very successfully deployed with our local commercial partner banks. These credit lines target local SMEs and helps them procure more advanced technologies, the technologies that will help them in standardizing their production quality and increase the production capacity to meet the demands that can come from the European markets. The infrastructure investments that we have done so far, including the border crossing points, including the road. We recently at the annual meeting also signed a project with the State Revenue Committee to create a one-stop shop for all import and export activities. This is called a SUNIC, Foreign Economic Activity Center. All of these investments support further connectivity to outside world, to outside countries, and also support the local companies in meeting the necessary standards to be competitive on developed markets.
EBRD helps acquire buses of high standards to create a healthier ecosystem in Armenia. Is this a priority, green financing, for our country, or is this policy dictated an EBRD priority?
I think the priorities of EBRD and the government meet in this respect. I mean, for EBRD, green finance is a key strategic priority. The bank has committed to invest at least 50% of its investment in green technologies. Buses were one example of that, but I think it's important to note that Yerevan and Gyumri were one of the first cities in all of EBRD countries of operations that signed a Green Cities framework. Under this framework agreement, we identify the green projects that can be beneficial for the citizens of the cities and then gradually implement them. Buses is one example of that, but we have also done street lighting that is more efficient than the existing one, energy efficiency investments in metros, water utilities, and so forth. I think green is a topic that is unavoidable and is outmost priority for both the IFIs but also the host countries.
EBRD will finance the construction of the southern section of the Sisyan-Kajaran road with a loan of €236. This is the largest infrastructure project ever. What's the estimated effect that this will have, considering that Armenia will gain access to the Black Sea countries?
Indeed, this is a historic project. The total project is more than €1 billion that we are financing together with our partner international financial institutions. I mentioned EIB and ADB. There's also a discussion on bilateral financing of the tunnel section, which is a middle section of the project. And if you just put into the context, this is an investment that will create jobs not only during the development phase, which is the construction, which will take anywhere from probably 5 to 10 years, but also revitalize the economies alongside the road. We will see increased tourism numbers. For example, these sections that we are financing significantly decreases the time that is necessary to access the south from Yerevan, or on contrary, to export the goods from the south to north to Yerevan and then further to Georgia and Potiport. There will be also green technologies considered alongside the road, including e-charging stations and very high environmental standards that will create further opportunities for sustainable tourism development.
Armenia is revisiting its relationship not only with hostile countries such as Azerbaijan and Turkey, but also with friendly countries like Iran and Georgia. Is there a roadmap of infrastructure on the table with these three countries?
So Armenian government has presented their flagship project, which is Crossroads of Peace. This project was also discussed during our annual meeting, and I think it's a very important project to rehabilitate the existing transport and trade routes, energy routes, air cargo routes that exist with all the neighbor countries. And I think it's important that we, our peers and agencies like USAID play a role in it. In this respect, during the annual meeting, we also signed a memorandum of understanding together with our colleagues from USAID to support Armenia's further connectivity to the Middle Corridor and increase its role in the overall trade and logistics infrastructure.
Are you saying that EBRD and USAID will be financing the Crossroad of Peace?
The EBRD and USAID signed a memorandum of understanding to support Armenia, and this is both the soft support around feasibility studies, advisory services, assessment of the best routes, and that's what usually USAID does. And then from EBRD side and other IFI side, the investments will be more in the infrastructure once the relevant studies have identified which are the most feasible infrastructure investments.
Finances will follow.
That is the intention. We would not want to spend money, energy and resources of both Armenian government and ourselves without having an outlook on financing.
April 5 statement between Western leaders and Pashinyan said that there is a commitment to help increase Armenia's resilience. Economically speaking, how else besides all the above mentioned will EBRD be supporting Armenia to enhance resilience?
We've done a very good job together with the Central Bank of Armenia increasing the resilience of Armenian financial institution sector, and I think that is one of the main components of a well-functioning economy. The local commercial banks are very well capitalized, very professional, and the recent shocks such as COVID, the 44-day war, and more recent hostilities in Armenia and also in broader region with the Russia's war on Ukraine and instability and war in Middle East. All of this have shown that Armenian financial institution sector is very resilient and is ready for the future. On top of that, we have done quite a significant work supporting the resilience of the SMEs through our advisory work, where we help local companies find necessary consultants for them to improve their processes and become more resilient. So the resilience is a big part of the works that we do, and in every project that we analyze and finance, we want to see how these investments help the resilience of the country.
And one more time, EBRD investments come at a crucial time for Armenia of democratic transition, but there is a need to institutionalize democracy to make it irrevocable. Does EBRD prioritize institutionalization of democracy in Armenia? Is there support in this direction?
We have in past supported the judicial system of Armenia by training the insolvency judges, and we are the reform work and policy dialogue is big part of what we do in the country. Obviously, we are not only financing investments, but we work with respective line ministries to identify the areas where they need or where they're interested to implement international best practice, and then we mobilize technical cooperation and assistance to help them through this process. It's a big part of our everyday work, and it will continue to be in coming years.
Thank you one more time for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Asli, for interviewing me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Head of EBRD office in Armenia, George Akhalkadze, sat down with the First Analytical tonight.